Now, as this situation in the Middle East grows increasingly dire, Amnesty International is calling on the Israeli army to immediately rescind its order to people to evacuate areas of Gaza. The organisation is calling the move appalling and says the 24-hour notice cannot be considered a, quote, effective warning and may amount to forced displacement of the civilian population. And joining me now is researcher on Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, Budour Hassan, a blind Palestinian journalist from Israel who joined Amnesty International in 2022. Thank you for joining us. Amnesty International is calling this evacuation order a violation of international humanitarian law. What are people going through right now trying to get out of Gaza?
I've been listening to you, and it's striking, to be honest, how much people in Gaza are treated as abstracts, as nameless, faceless masses. Well, as part of our work at Amnesty, we've been interviewing people in Gaza for the past 6 days, since Saturday. And we've interviewed survivors who had the grace to talk to us while trying to remove the bodies of their loved ones from beneath the rubble. We had the privilege of talking to people who were paramedics who had to see their fellow paramedics being killed in front of their eyes and then return to work the next day. And we have been interviewing people who had their house destroyed for the second time in less than a year after it was destroyed last year, after they had managed to reconstruct it, only for that house to fall again, to be destroyed by Israeli bombs. So these are the people we are interviewing in Gaza, including people with disabilities, children, pregnant women, and people who had already been displaced once during since the start of this conflict. And now they are threatened. Either they are displaced again or they be killed. And then this is the choice that people in Gaza have to live with. Do they agree to be displaced again, not knowing if they will ever be able to return to their homes, or be killed? And these are choices that no civilians should have to face. No family should have to choose between being torn apart or having to be displaced. And this is precisely why we have called on Israeli authorities to rescind its order to evacuate Palestinian civilians in Gaza. First, because it's absolutely not practical. With Israel's bombing of access roads in Gaza, with ambulances not able to make it, we're considering that Israel wants these people to be displaced to the south, considering we're talking about more than 1 million people, families, people with disability, children, women, elderly. These people, many people are crammed in hospitals, sleeping on floors outside hospital. It's absolutely unfeasible for these people to be displaced, not within a day, not within a week, not within a month. It's by Israel's obligation to make sure that these civilians are protected, including from displacement. It is the obligation of the international community not to watch while Israel threatens Palestinians with another Nakba, with another displacement similar to the one that they had endured in 1948.
Now, you've done years of research on the intensifying situation in this part of the world. I want to ask you, though, because obviously we're watching Israel carry out these massive airstrikes over Gaza, and it is between these two groups. What role can Egypt play in all this? Is Egypt in a position to try to help with humanitarian relief, opening the Rafah border? I mean, you know, the Israelis have to agree to that as well, but what can Egypt do? And what does Egypt want to do you think, to try to help in this situation?
First of all, Israel as the occupying power, and we have to remember that Gaza is still under occupation, is still under Israel's effective control. Israel as the occupying power must immediately and unconditionally lift its blockade on the Gaza Strip and end all measures of collective punishment and allow fuel, water, and food into Gaza. And in terms of Egypt, Amnesty International has always called in Egypt also to allow a safe passage especially for the wounded. Gaza's hospitals are not only on breaking point, the medical system in Gaza has completely collapsed due to the intensity of Israeli airstrikes. Hospitals are simply incapable of treating the wounded. People in Gaza have lived through these offensives so many times before, 4 large-scale offensives since 2008, but this is something that is unprecedented. And we believe that Egypt must allow people in Gaza, especially those in urgent need of medical treatment, to be allowed to be treated. But we also demand that Israel stop bombing the Rafah crossing. One of the reasons why the Rafah crossing has been closed is because of Israel's incessant bombing. See, there is absolutely nowhere safe for Palestinians in Gaza. People in Gaza are asked to flee to the south, but then the south, meaning Rafah, Khan Yunis, are also bombed by Israeli airstrikes. And this is the limbo that Palestinians in Gaza are trapped in, literally trapped in.
Budour, I hope you don't mind. James, I hope you don't mind as I'm listening to this interview. And Budour, I'm here in the United States as James is there on the ground in Tel Aviv. But I'm reading your story, and it's fascinating how you were born blind and had so many challenges growing up, but you were drawn to journalism to tell stories. I am so curious, when this is such a visual, heart-wrenching story, from your perspective, what is it like to cover this as a blind journalist? How do you feel it? How do you hear it? How do you smell it, even in ways that other journalists may not be as tuned into as you are? You definitely have a different perspective here.
Yeah, first of all, it's not about me. But most importantly, it's about the people whose story, and as a researcher, whose story I have to document, and the violations of their human rights who I have to document. Obviously, for me, knowing you asked this, and the first question I thought of when I heard this order, what would people with disability like me have to do in such a situation? What would the thousands of blind people in Gaza have to do when they are ordered to evacuate, including people who have lost their eyes because of Israeli bullets, because of also Israeli airstrikes? We're talking always about Gaza. In 2018 and 2019, people in Gaza marched peacefully for more than a year, demanding an end to the blockade, demanding that Israel grant them the right of return, because the majority of people in Gaza are descendants of refugees who have been displaced in 1948. And Israeli snipers responded by shooting at them directly. Many people, including people we interviewed at Amnesty, have lost their eyes or have become permanently disabled. So it is about these people that I think. Obviously, you listen to the voices of people, you listen to the suffering of people. Probably you are made more sensitive to accepting and to understanding what these people have gone through, especially the more vulnerable of Gaza's population. You learn to empathize with this suffering and to understand how privileged you are and to take advantage of your privilege in order to document this story. But again, as I said, it's not about me. And obviously, working at Amnesty, we have our evidence lab team. We verify everything in terms of images, videos. And I think as someone who can listen, it's learning to listen. And I hope that US media also learns this art of listening to the voices of people in Gaza, listening to their dreams, listening to what they have to say, listening to the heart-wrenching messages that came out of Gaza, with people not knowing whether to stay or to leave, having to make these decisions, these choices of some of the family leave, some stay, only to make sure that at least some members of these families survive. So far in our documentation, in just one case, we're documenting the members, 15 members of the same families were killed. Grandparents, fathers and children, they were all killed. The eldest was 76 years old. The youngest was 18 months in just one attack. And these are attacks that we could only be able to document due to the blockade, due to the shortage of electricity, water. It has been incredibly difficult to reach survivors, witnesses, and victims in Gaza. And yet we have been doing it. And I think it's the obligation of media as well to cover that. Yes. People in Gaza want to tell these stories. The problem is the world is unable, incapable, and not willing to listen.
Yeah, well, we are willing to listen. James is listening. I'm listening. We are listening to you. We know you are listening, believe me. And we will not stop listening, and we will not stop covering this story. Budour Hassan, thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.